Hello, everybody. I'm Brian Heisenbottom,
And I'm Mike Carlson.
and welcome to the View from the U.
Okay, Brian, a lot of great games this week. A lot of great football this weekend. One of the better weeks, I would definitely say. So why don't you give us a quick breakdown of your top 25?
What I have is that there are a few couple blocks of teams I'm going to analyze. The first one is 2 and 3 Oregon at FSU. I was really excited when Florida State climbed to the second rank over Oregon, but I'm really unhappy that they switched it back around because I can understand Oregon dropping after giving up 30 plus points to a not very good Washington State team, but I mean, as you can see about what Florida State did to NC State, it was just a walkover, and they really didn't do anything to prove that they weren't the number 2 team in the country. Moving on now, Stanford and Baylor. This is another thing I was surprised by because Stanford just barely edged Oregon State. They did not play a good game, but since I'm seeing this more often, I'm just not sure if Kevin Hogan's a top 10 quarterback. But the problem with this is that Baylor, as you will see, just walked all over Kansas, and I'm really surprised that Baylor didn't leapfrog them, having Baylor at number 5 and Stanford at number 6. So now South Carolina, um, I do not, I do not like South Carolina in the first place. But putting that aside, I don't think that they're 14th ranked just because the Missouri holder didn't turn the laces out. I mean, they did beat Mizzou, which I guess you do have to take into account, but they're just not playing like a top 15 team, which I really think needs to show through the ranks. So moving on to Mike, your team Notre Dame. I bet you're happy seeing them back in the top 25.
Always happy.
But I'm with you. I do share my doubts about Tommy Rees, and I'm not sure if he's the top 25 quarterback. And you just don't want a weak link in such a big spot. Because if they keep winning, I could see them holding the top 25 spot for a while. But again, I do have my doubts. And then the final team I want to talk about, who's not in the top 25, who I'm waiting on, is Arizona State. When will these guys get back in the top 25? Their only losses are to great teams. They've lost to Stanford and Notre Dame, but they are the one team except for probably Alabama, who I just would not want to play at home because they are rolling, they are on fire. And Mike, I'm going to hand it to you now for your Heisman analysis.
Okay, Brian, so Heisman analysis. A lot of the same thing for this first one. My front runner is still Jameis Winston. We talked about some of his intangibles last week. Here are some of his tangible stats this week. 23 passing touchdowns to 4 interceptions, 27 total touchdowns, a 70% completion percentage, and finally a 207 QBR, and then finally 2,300 yards passing. Brian, that kind of stuff is undeniable. I mean, when you look at a Heisman frontrunner, this is the guy who I think is there. I mean, a lot of people have Mariota in front, and with good reason. I mean, 20 touchdowns, no interceptions, 29 total touchdowns with very few turnovers. But I still think that Winston's the guy because Winston has that signature win that has eluded Marcus Mariota to this point. I mean, he's played some good Pac-10 opponents, but he hasn't played anything to quite the caliber of going up against Clemson at Clemson. I mean, that's a tough thing to do. But now I want to spotlight one of my rising stars in the Heisman, Bryce Petty. This is the quarterback at Baylor. This guy, Brian, he's amazing. I looked at his stats today, and they blew me away. 18 touchdowns to 1 interception, 24 total touchdowns, a 70% completion percentage, a 219 QBR, which is better than Jameis Winston's QBR, and then finally 2,500 total offensive yards. I mean, this guy's on fire. Brian, he's one of the best quarterbacks right now in all of college football, I would argue. And we're kind of seeing an RG3 type of clone here in this very explosive Baylor attack. And I think that Bryce Petty he's fourth in the Heisman rankings with good reason. I mean, he hasn't had that signature win, and you can argue that the Big 12 isn't as strong that it used to be. But I still think Bryce Petty, he's the guy you got to look at in all of this, and I think he's a guy who will rise quickly and will be there. I think in New York come Heisman Award ceremony time.
Yeah, if you look at the rankings, you still have Johnny Manziel just keeping his head just above the water, even though, I mean, we'll have to see. 2 key losses.
It's definitely weird to see Johnny in there. I mean, you don't really see a lot of quarterbacks have 2 losses and are still in Heisman contention. So it's just one of those unique things that you got to see. And I think by just being Johnny Manziel, being Johnny Football, he kind of, you know what, he's grandfathered into that top five Heisman race.
So for games this week, I had BYU versus Boise State. Now in this game, the numbers really do speak for themselves. So that's really what I'm gonna lead with. I mean, Boise State. You see that they lost. Part of the reason is they scored 3 first-half points. I mean, BYU just got out to a lead early, and it was Boise State chasing them. And with an offense as good as BYU's, you just cannot find yourself behind against them. Also, not helping Boise State is the turnover differential. Boise State had 4 turnovers compared to BYU's none. And again, when you're playing the BYU team, who I really like BYU, they really don't get enough credit because they don't have a football program that you see in the top 25 very often. But I do think they should sometime soon get a spot in the bottom of that. So Boise State had 499 total yards, which is a lot. But if you flip the coin, BYU had 368. This was such an offensive battle. And as you would expect, the BYU and Boise State offenses, that's what they've been doing all season. They're run by their offenses. But Taysom Hill, quarterback for BYU, he had an outstanding game. Not often do you get 339 passing yards and 4 passing touchdowns. I mean, this guy is just crushing people. I think he's one of the biggest reasons why BYU is doing so well, flying so high where they are right now. Even though the passing game was so big, both teams had a rusher who had 100+ yards, and both teams had over 20 first downs. So, looking at it, in the big picture, is that BYU won because their offense played 60 minutes, and Boise State lost because their offense played 59. So, with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Mike for the call on his game.
Okay, Brian, I did Baylor versus KU, and this one was pretty lopsided. I'm not gonna lie, I don't think KU showed up in this game at all. It took a while for Baylor to start up. Their first 2 drives were really rare punts for them. They had to punt the ball away, but that third drive, they took off. Everything after that third drive, you're looking at 743 total yards of offense in that entire game. Those are Oregon Duck type of numbers right there, and that kind of offense. 8 of their 9 drives were under 2 minutes. So you're talking about scoring quick, scoring efficiently, and scoring a lot. And then I want to spotlight Bryce Petty. He was my rising star in my Heisman conversation. Had a 455 total yards, 3 touchdowns, and he had 2 to Tevin Ross for 100. He had 2 to Tevin Ross, who was his clear favorite target. And then he had 4 total. He also had 1 rushing touchdown. And, this team, Brian, had 500 yards of total offense at the end of the first half. So you're looking at a team that did the majority of their damage in the first half and then still did a significant amount of damage in the second half with a lot of their second stringers, a lot of those other guys back in there. This is a Bears team, Brian. I talk about them every week because they're under the radar, I think. They've scored 50 points in 6 out of their 7 games. They're scoring quickly, they're scoring efficiently, and they're looking good while doing it. Nike is giving these guys new uniforms every week. They're trying new combos, and I think that this is just a team that it's a shame that they're underrated because they'd be such an exciting team to watch if we took the time. And then you're also looking at a Baylor attack. You're probably thinking, Bryce Petty, he carries this team. That's 100% false. They had 5 rushing touchdowns in that game to Bryce Petty's 3 passing touchdowns. You're looking at C. Strunk. He had 1 touchdown and 109 yards rushing. Shock Linwood had 106 for 2 touchdowns. And then Glasgow Martin had 55 yards for 1 touchdown. And then obviously that 5th one coming courtesy of your quarterback, Bryce Petty. So, Brian, this is a really cool team to watch. I wish playing in the Big 12, granted, if they were playing in the SEC, all the pub would be on them. But because they're playing in the Big 12, and the Big 12 it's not one of those eras for them where everyone's strong. The days of Colt McCoy, Vince Young, and Sam Bradford they're kind of gone right now, and the Big 12's in a transition. They're in a transition period, and I think that because they're in that transition period, that Baylor kind of gets the short end of the stick, and that they don't get a lot of pub. And I think this is a team that deserves a ton of pub just because they put up a ton of points. And if the Oregon Ducks played the Baylor Bears, Brian, the score would be video game like because both of these offenses are so similar, so quick, and you look at it, and this Baylor team that starts with the amazing athletes they have. Baylor's one of the premier track and field teams and has one of the premier collegiate track and field teams. And RG3 was a premier collegiate track and field athlete before he became a quarterback full time. So I mean, you're looking at a Baylor team that just it's so full of athletes. They're such a treat to watch. And I'm kind of bummed that they were only at 5. I think we talked about it earlier today. That the only reason Stanford is number 4 right now is because they're Stanford. They have that pedigree associated with them. It's that intangible that all the BCS voters talk about. It's because Andrew Luck went there. I think if you're looking at this unbiasedly, and I think right now if Baylor plays Stanford, I guarantee you, Baylor lights them up. So it'll be interesting to see as the weeks go on and how Baylor will do. I think right now that if they stay on the track they're on and keep putting up all those points, they're going to be exciting to watch. It's definitely going to be really cool.
Yeah, 2 guys you mentioned there I need to talk about are RG3 and Andrew Luck, because, I mean, even though I love my beautiful S so much, I love Stanford, you're absolutely right, because if you think about the 2 breakout quarterbacks from the same class, Robert Griffin III and Andrew Luck, if you look at Baylor, they really have gotten a new guy in Bryce Petty who can replace him, who can keep this high-powered offense going, and who can keep the Baylor Bears rolling as they were. And Kevin Hogan, on the other hand, is nowhere near Andrew Luck. He's not in the same century.
Exactly. I mean, Hogan is not the guy that you look at Hogan's numbers and you compare him to Petty's numbers, and it stands out a ton. I mean, you can argue probably right now that the Pac-12 is a little bit of a stronger conference, but I don't think it's an AC and I don't think it's above and beyond where I don't think it's on the level that the SEC is right now, because there's some good opponents. It's a mixed bag there, but when you only have to play UCLA once a year and that's it, and that's really your biggest game, I don't think it's fair to penalize Baylor, because they're in a Big 12 right now that's kind of waning right now.
Yeah, I mean, Baylor and Oklahoma and then Texas Tech are really the 3 teams that get recognition. And has Baylor played them yet this year, or are they still set to play them?
I don't believe so. Baylor's, I think, just now starting to get into that schedule, that part of the schedule where it gets to crunch time. But this Baylor team, Brian, it's tough to. I mean, a defensive battle it's not easy to win, but it's easier to win than a shootout. When you put up 50 points each week, it's tough to have that. It's tough. It puts a lot of pressure on the other team to put up 50 points too, just to win. And I mean, 50 points is a rarity in college football, but to put up 50 points each week, I mean, it's no fluke. You're doing something right. You're scoring a lot of points, and I think the only offense right now that would be able to keep up with Baylor would probably be the Oregon Ducks offense, just because they're so similar. And that's it. I mean, it's tough to beat a team that's going to put up 50 and 60 each week.
Yeah, so Mike, why don't you tell us about the games you're doing next week?
Okay, Brian, I'm going to throw it back a little bit. I'm going to throw it back to the days of the U versus FSU. Yeah, I'm going back to the well. I'm going to cover Jameis Winston again. Miami University against Florida State. Brian, the rivalry's kind of been down these last couple of years. Not a lot of firepower on either side. Not as great as it was, back in the glory days of the U or the glory days of FSU. But it's starting to come back, Brian. It's that atmosphere of the U versus FSU is it's starting to heat up, and I think this game is going to be awesome. I'm psyched to watch this one.
Yeah, I mean that's really going to be a great game. The one thing that I draw concern to is I was watching Miami versus Georgia Tech, and Miami's ball security it's very sort of polarized. So the defense is good as Florida State. If they're not on, I could easily see Miami having 5 turnovers. So that's a big key for them. And honestly, the key for Jameis is play like Jameis.
Yeah, just show up and do what you do best, Mr. Winston. Because you know what, he's a great quarterback, and I think it's going to be really tough for Miami to game plan around him. I mean, granted, they have 9 weeks of tape to take a look at him, but this guy just he finds a way to win every week, and he loads the stat sheet while doing it. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your game, Brian? What are you going to be covering this week?
All right, Mike, a few weeks ago it was your turn to double dip. Now it's mine. I got 2 huge Big Ten games that are going on. We have the all-famous Michigan rivalry, Michigan versus Michigan State, which is going to be awesome, especially since they're coincidentally ranked 21 and 22. So, I mean, the standings just show how great of a game this is going to be. I mean, Michigan after losing to Penn State, and they've really had not the most desirable season, especially after losing Denard Robinson. But they're still a very good team, and Michigan State has really been underrated for this whole season. Now they're in the top 25 and ready to make some noise. But on the other side of the coin, I have Northwestern versus Nebraska. Now this is basically a do or die game for both teams. I mean, Northwestern is 0-4 in the Big Ten. They've really been on the downfall since they've lost to Ohio State. Same with Nebraska. I mean, they've gotten their top 25 breaks, and then they've lost to UCLA and to Minnesota. Minnesota is actually one of the huge surprise teams like Mizzou you just wouldn't expect. But this is really a game that both these teams really need to win to turn their season around. I mean, a spot in the Big Ten championship is not likely for either of them, but they're playing for a good bowl position, and really, I want this for the Cats because their offense has just been slow, and this is a huge test against the notorious Black Shirts in Nebraska. So, we'll see. We'll that's really all I'll say. We'll see.
Yeah, and you definitely got to see. I mean, you look at Northwestern and that Ohio State hangover lingering, I think, a little bit more than they wanted it to, and going 0-3 in the Big Ten afterwards. And you know what? You can't see either of these teams in the Big Ten championship. I mean, it's going to be Ohio State, versus someone else in the Big Ten. The way Ohio State's playing, but I think both these teams have the potential, like you said, to be in a really good bowl position. You know, make a lot of money for their university. So I think that'll be interesting. Definitely will be an interesting game.
Yeah, so thank you all for watching. Please click like, favorite, and subscribe, and we'll see you all next week.
Yeah, we'll see y'all next week. Go Florida State. Jameis Winston, baby.
Go Northwestern. Bye.